Okay, so this is the final installment of the Fuckery Corp trilogy, whereby me and Dean Carney, the Senior Planning Manager of Forestry Corp New South Wales, basically had separate interviews on the radio. And we were disputing the fact that they wanted to log the native forests in our area. So this is my investigation of the wood supply and consumption that's used by Forestry Corp. I know that sounds fucking enthralling, but beware. The riddle, lies and corruptions made Arimba State Forest a really great case study for how corrupt this state-owned corporation actually is. So, this is what Dean said about the products that we use from the forest.
Good morning.
Why do we need to do this? As Ursula said, there seems to be a lot going into wood chipping. Is that correct? And if so, why do we need to keep logging our state forests?
Well, that's not quite true. The majority of the timber we harvest on the North Coast does go into high-quality products.
Okay, so that's what he said. But basically what I decided to do is I went through all the harvest plans of the active north compartments in New South Wales, and I found that 45% of their calculations of wood were being used for low quality pulpwood, such as salvage wood, pulpwood, wood chip, what have you.
But also into specialty products, particularly from forests down in the Hunter and that sort of central coast area. They're used in things like wharf construction, where they have really high quality properties for being immersed in.
The interesting thing is that forestry failed to neglect the fact that up to 60% of the wood that they chop is left in the forest to be later burnt or just left as, which is basically the biomass. So you've got to think about it. So you got this tree, 60% of it's basically just left in the bush, and then up to 45% of what's left over is just used for low quality salvage. And then there's a further percentage on top of that, which is used for another low quality purpose. So yeah, it really got me thinking. Here's a short video that explains it.
Logging contributes significantly to Australia's greenhouse gas emissions. It releases roughly 20 million tonnes a year. So that's equivalent to around a quarter of Australia's transport emissions. The logging industry wants you to believe that the carbon from a logged forest is stored long term in products like housing or furniture. The reality is that this is far from the case. Only about 6% of the forest carbon gets stored in these products. Let me break this down for you. A forest is made up of what is called biomass. That's all the wood, the leaves, and the plants. Basically all the living material. This biomass is what contains the forest carbon. When tall eucalypt forests are logged, like those that occur in Victoria and Tasmania, up to 60% of that biomass is left behind. This biomass is piled up into massive mounds and burnt after logging, or it's left behind to rot. So that's 60% of the forest carbon that gets released back into the atmosphere. Of the 40% of the wood that is removed from the forest, approximately 85% of it is turned into wood chips. What this all means is that when Australia's remarkable tall eucalypt forests are logged, around 94% of the carbon from that forest is released into the atmosphere within a few years. 94%.
In Victoria and Tasmania, it's much easier to trace exactly how wood is being used from our native forest. In New South Wales, I found this process so hard. So what I did was I went on the ABARES website and I found that the total calculation of wood that was coming from native forests, I found that the pulp log actually exceeded the saw logs. Forestry aren't carbon neutral, they're actually carbon negative. But they will justify their entire operations on the minuscule amount of furniture that they make.
Well, that's not quite true.
And if you don't believe it, have a look at the way Victoria Forest is, the pallet shortage, the pallet shortage that's currently happening. The thing is they're trying to basically say, no, native forests are being used to make furniture, but we need our native forests to make pallets. It got to the stage where Vic Forest released this lovely media release saying that pallets run the entire world. Rah, rah, this justifies our native forest operations. So looks like native forests are now just being used for pallets. So it's really interesting to know that 87% of the wood that we consume is actually made from plantations. So we have hardwood plantations, which are native forests basically turn into plantations with black bart and other species I don't know about. And then there's softwood plantation, which is basically a pine. Now, the whole world, well, Australia is crapping on about the fact that we have a shortage of timber. Now, we do actually have a shortage of timber, despite the fact that we produce more timber than our needs. The thing is, what's happened is due to a lack of foresight, the building industry, whilst going on a steep incline since 2011, mind you, not just since the fires, there has been basically no new plantations since around that era. So softwood is in demand. The thing is, we do actually make enough timber to supply our own needs. The problem is the way we manufacture it. According to one of the researchers at the Australia Institute who I had a correspondence with, we do not manufacture it in a way where we can actually do it onshore. We actually ship a lot of our wood offshore to get processed overseas that we have to import again. So not only have we made ourselves a fucking stitch up if we're still logging native forests, and now we're running out of timber because we didn't put enough plantations in time. We actually have enough wood to supply our own needs, yet we have to ship this overseas because we don't have our own onshore processing facilities. Sounds like a great fucking business model there, mate.
Well, that's not quite true.
Anyways.
Oh yeah, so they'll also try to say, if we don't get the timber from Australia, we'll have to get it from overseas, somewhere like Southeast Asia, where the logging practices aren't as sustainable. This is rubbish. According to the ANU, which they basically stated this was patently absurd. This is rubbish. Patently absurd. This is rubbish. What is it? So. This is rubbish. According to the ANU, the amount of plantations in Victoria could supply wood for native forest wood for paper manufacture several times over. This is rubbish. In fact, we use our hardwood plantations for basically pulpwood. Most of it gets shipped overseas. It might be of some interest to you that we are actually the second biggest exporter of wood chips on the planet. We exceed Brazil by almost 3 times. So anyways, so when they say that this is all being used for furniture and carbon capture storage, you can now say this is bullshit.
Well, that's not quite true.
Bullshit.